Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Education Leadership for a Digital World, a Digital Promise webinar series supported by the Wallace Foundation. My name is Anthony Baker, and I'm the Project Director on the Learning Experience Design team at Digital Promise. And today's webinar is How Design Thinking Can Encourage Teacher Leadership. So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about some of the projects going on at Digital Promise and how we've been able to engage teachers in the design thinking process through those projects and how that process has allowed them to take leadership roles in their districts. So I'm really happy to have joining us today Elyse Gainor and Megan Pattenhouse from my team, the Learning Experience Design team at Digital Promise. And along with them is Rola Tibshirani from All Saints High School in Ontario and Chad Sorrells from Helena Middle School in Alabama. Thanks for joining, everyone. So how are we doing today? Feeling good? Great. So Today's webinar is really focused on a couple of projects we have going on at Digital Promise that engage teachers as designers. So in this Teachers as Designers process, what we're looking to do is really have teachers re-examine their educational opportunities for their students through using their vision, through ideating and prototyping, and through really thinking about the user journey. So what I like to invite participants to do today is if you have questions as we go out throughout our conversation, I'd love for you to put them into the Q&A, and we'll share some resources as well in the chat box. So at this time, I'd like to ask Elyse and Megan to talk a little bit about their projects. So Elyse, would you start us off? Tell us about Learning Studios.
Sure. So Learning Studios is a program that started as a partnership with HP and Microsoft, where we were not only providing hardware, but these design learning experiences with teachers and students in different schools around the world. So the core of the program was really about developing design sensitivities in students and making as a way of learning and addressing needs in the community that related back to the Sustainable Development Goals. So we ran a handful of design challenges that are open-ended, and it gave students and teachers the opportunities to look at their immediate community and figure out, what can we create that could address a problem in this community or a need in this community. And it inspired students and teachers to work together to design for that need. And it also encouraged teachers to discover how they could design the learning experience with their students. So not just designing for a specific outcome, but really learning and iterating along the way.
Megan, would you like to talk a little bit about the Teaching Fellows program?
Yeah, so the Teaching Fellows work really grew out of that partnership with HP and Microsoft, and we were really looking for educators who are designing for powerful learning experiences. So we think about powerful learning as learning that is personal and accessible, it's authentic and challenging, it's collaborative and connected, and it's inquisitive and reflective. So when we are thinking about how we could support innovative educators who are really embodying and building out powerful learning experiences for their students, we also wanted to provide really powerful learning experiences for those educators. And we know that connecting educators with each other and really allowing them to figure out who is in their network and use their professional learning networks to accelerate the already amazing things they're doing are really the way that we wanted to do that. And so in order to do that, instead of kind of doing traditional sit and get PD, we really focused on how could we engage our educators in challenge-based learning by figuring out what's a problem of practice as related to powerful learning that you really want to dig into. Who are the other folks in your network who are also passionate about solving that problem or diving deeper into that problem. So we really had our educators engage in challenge-based learning from beginning to end, modeling the practices we want to see educators using with students. So really, we started by building out a forum of what topics were engaging or pressing areas that they wanted to dive further into, match them up with other folks within the cohort who wanted to dive into those same issues. And then really started with the questions and figuring out what questions did we have about that topic, and really we call it living in the questions, because we in that design thinking often want to skip right to the end of figuring out a solution and implementing it into our classroom, especially because teachers are very strong problem solvers who have action orientations, but really taking time to dig into what the research says about these topics, what other folks are thinking and questioning about this topic, And then really moving into that prototyping. Now that we've taken a lot of time to think about and dive into this, what's something we're going to try differently in our classroom, and then we're going to come back to our professional learning network and talk about how that went, and what worked and what didn't, and how we might iterate moving forward, which is a really great opportunity for folks to learn not only from what they were trying out in their own classroom, but to learn from the collective of different folks who are prototyping and iterating and trying different things in their own classrooms. And both Chad and Rola were HP Teaching Fellows, so they might be able to tell you a little bit about their personal challenge that they worked through in our challenge-based learning.
Yeah, let's do that. So Chad, let's hear from you first. Talk a little bit about your challenge-based learning experience and your overall experience thus far with the Teaching Fellows process.
Excellent. So with the HP Teaching Fellow, it has been by far the best professional development I've had in my career of 18 years. And I mean, that includes master's and specialist programs and even in a doctoral program. It by far has probably pushed me to enhance my teaching profession the most of anything I've been involved in. It's just thinking about what I do and why I do it. How is this best for students? And then making sure that it incorporates those powerful learning tenets that Megan pointed out, which I really believe those are kind of, I don't know, if I were thinking of adjectives that describe what I do in the classroom, those are the things I live, that I believe in. And so hearing them each time makes me reflect on how proud I am, I guess, of what I do in the classroom, and the fact that HP Teaching Fellows has given me that kind of platform for it. The main thing with the Teaching Fellows is it's given me a chance to connect with people outside of Alabama, which in Alabama, there's not a lot of educators that are connecting. And so, I mean, I've connected with people in Canada, Rola. I've connected with people, in New York. I've connected with people in California. But in just seeing what they do with their students and knowing that our students are really the same, but how we approach the topic is different. And so it's allowed that conversation to happen and us really to collaborate and work together. One of the challenge-based learnings I was involved in this past year was 2 teachers from Canada and myself were working on how do we reinvent kind of professional development for teachers. The stagnant professional development, one size fits all, where we all sit and get. How can we make that look differently? And so we really used kind of the micro-credential platform that Digital Promise has and says, we could really kind of individualize this and personalize it for each teacher, and then allow teachers to become kind of content experts. And we kind of developed this process that I know the other teachers took back, that I've even taken back to my district and said, hey, here's some things we need to kind of think about, ways that would be more beneficial for our students. And so from that, I've even used HP Teaching Fellows as a way to kind of give me a platform to work in other areas of Digital Promise, as far as building teacher micro-credentials and student micro-credentials, which has been another huge component. And so with building these micro-credentials, again, it was huge, just giving students that platform for this powerful learning that Digital Promise believes in and really promotes. So both of those programs have been great in my professional development and allowing me that platform to help others.
Great. I'd love to hear from Rola. Share some of your experiences with the Learning Studios process, and then if you want to reflect on your HP Teaching Fellows work as well, that'd be great.
Yes, it's been an experience, not only like exactly what Chad had said, but I will go further regarding the deep learning process. It's a process that really speaks to our human process of learning as teaching and reflecting and risk-taking and learning along with the students. So not only that, it gave us a deeper understanding with us as colleagues to really unpack what does that look like and go through the process and share and iterate together and bring that thinking from all over North America and around the world to what that looked like in the classroom, and share, having a platform to share and learn together as well. So it really has been really focusing on the students' need and how best can we serve their thinking and deepen to really take actions and become community members locally, globally, as well as nationally. And so having the tools really, it has augmented students' experience in leadership as well, in having to really design, not only collect data, but also interview, connect to experts and design and look through the process of learning is iterating and becoming community, that collaborative process of learning together and building knowledge together as well. So not only for us as educators, we're building knowledge, but the students were building knowledge as well. And having the accessibility with the tools gave them that confidence in really problem solving real world, from having to work with elderlies and find tools for them by observing and collecting data and interviewing, as well as having to look at within our school, within our classroom community, for students, you know, to have better visibility, or students for autistic kids to work with them, and providing them tools to really be learn on a daily basis. And so having that confidence that they are designers, they are risk takers, they have that leadership to problem solve and be community members as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I heard you say something that really resonates with me as well. So I ran a similar project called Challenge-Based Science Learning, where I worked with a series of teachers to write some innovative curriculum that was really student-focused. And one of the things you mentioned was this idea of really getting to know your students and designing for them, right? And that really falls in line with this idea of having empathy for the people you're designing for, and doing the learning and the research and immersing yourself in their experiences. And it makes me think about another question to kind of throw out to everybody here. And so what I wanted to ask you is, how does approaching teaching and also design for teaching with that design mindset, how does it change or shift your relationship with the instructional practices that you choose? And feel free to jump in, whoever feels like they're ready to say something. So as you think about how you were designing, how did it change your instructional practices? What were you doing before that maybe changed once you learned more about your students?
Well, it gave the students agency, gave us agency, because we both became learners together. It's really having to be able, like you have said, the empathy, right? The empathy is the design process, not for us only to be empathetic who we're designing with, but to build that empathy as a community together and really learn to value each other's ideas and design together as well to problem solve. So having that as a key to that learning and opening up students' ideas and taking risks and valuing each other's, and I think that's the key to success. It's not just one directed idea, it's for the students to really value each other's idea and build together and come to a problem solving as a team. So that really has iterated my learning, as learning is really, it's not just me giving instructions, it's for them to take that agency, personalize the process, and become designers themselves. So ideating and iterating became part of that process, and having to build on their needs, individual needs, as well as who they are designing for. So that was the key to really to that process itself, and that obviously learning never stops. So having them to really be able to prototype and get feedback as well. And so that connection was a key to really becoming as learning as a human process.
And, you know, I love what Rola kind of said there. You know, it wasn't about her. And I think that's important. And sometimes as teachers, I think we hold on to that. It's all about me. It's about my lesson that I built, but it's about the students understanding, you know, making that lesson powerful for them. And learning together. I think that's been another key thing that I've kind of learned through this whole process is it's okay not to have all the answers. We can get in there and we can research together and really kind of explore it. And them seeing me as a learner and vulnerable there as a learner, I think gives them more power to have that empathy for each other and realize that, you know what, we're all learning at every stage of life.
That's great. And so you guys already kind of answered my second question for you all, which was, how did your role, your relationship to your students change through the process, right? And it sounds to me like what you're saying is you became a learner alongside them, because you have to really, in that empathy process, put yourselves in their shoes, right? So, great. So as you've gone through this process, right, a lot shifted about the way you were teaching or the way you were approaching a particular unit or even just a lesson. So how did the way that you were innovating and trying to make changes in your own practice change the way you related to other people in your building? So we've talked about your students, but let's talk about the other teachers that you interact with, or even your administrators. What happened when you started innovating to the people around you?
You know, I'll jump in here. It really, and I like referring to it as a fire. You know, it's taking that spark and trying to spread it to others. And I get so excited to learn a new tool and to hear this new tool, or really just to learn a new process with my students that really worked well, and to share that with other teachers. And it is fun to share that, but also hearing them come back and say, hey, this really worked with my room. And then what's really neat is they're learning things that I haven't thought about, and they're sharing those. So it's sharing that, I guess, that risk taking, you know, that we're really kind of promoting, and I guess enabling everyone else around us to say it's okay to jump in with your students, that to be learners and share what you've learned, to collaborate with each other instead of trying to be on an island ourselves.
For me, the leader, the principals of the school as well, became partnership in learning. We were all curious. Even whenever there were my colleagues across the hall, they all walked into the room. We were all learning together, and they were part of the whole learning process. And I was given opportunities as well to share within our staff meetings, and then bringing that curiosity and having other educators to be part of that process in my classroom and the learning as well. So it really has brought in a community of learning, and what does really problem solving look like, and what could we do, how students really become leaders and risk takers. So we have the curriculum, and how does that curriculum become relearning as well, problem solving. So why are we learning about history? Why are we learning about geography? What could we do in our community to really make that learning, finding a problem to solve? It could be from anything from building filters to having to connect to expert for water filtration, to having to connect to how the recycling problem. So once the kids, you give them that leadership into becoming an inquirers, and they understand the design process, and they know that they have also experts all over. So having to be able that we're not just the experts, to reach to people and connect with them and problem solve, and having that feedback, I think, is the key as well. So the whole community at our school became a learning community as well, and we all explore together that relearning is not just between us and the students, is really having to problem solve and be community members as well as global community.
Yeah, and I'll kind of share some of my own experience with that through the challenge-based science learning project. I think what we saw, so we had curriculum administrators involved in that project as well with the teachers. And I think at least one of them has really reflected back on that process and said, it allowed my teachers to take the lead in their classroom as like content experts. And then they have gone on to really share both above them to higher level teachers and below them strategies that have worked for them, you know, how it has changed their interaction with their students. So in that way, it really put them in a position of expertise and placed them in a way to relate to their colleagues in a different way, and to become kind of experts on the ground and embed it, which was really nice because, you know, organizations like Digital Promise can come in and do professional learning, or any other organization, but what can come out of this is having an embedded expert in your building once they go through this process. And Megan or Elyse, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything else you've seen throughout of these projects.
Yeah, I think one thing that being a part of the team that shares the stories of the amazing things that our HP Teaching Fellows are doing, and this whole process of teachers as designers has really emphasized the importance of vulnerability. And I think I heard that across everyone's answers of not feeling like you have to be the expert who knows everything, but actually that part of your expertise comes from iterating and designing and trying it different ways. I think that's really part of the paradigm shift that we're seeing in terms of like the sage on the stage of the teacher is the person who knows everything, and they don't have the questions, they answer the questions. And I think that that's something that when teachers really take this role as designers and really are vulnerable with their students and their community of like, I don't know the answers to that, but that's a great question. And how can we find out the answer to that together? Both brings your students in as designers and shows other teachers that, oh, it's okay to not feel defensive, or I don't have to feel like I need to know everything or have this totally worked out to try something new.
Yeah, I really am just echoing everything that was just said. One of the things that I took away from the Learning Studios project was seeing teachers really dive in as learners and telling me things that they didn't know that they were learning along the way. And also trusting their students to teach each other and kind of level that dynamic between the student and the teacher, so that the teacher doesn't have to be the expert all the time, but students can also learn and build skills from each other.
So yeah, that's great. So thanks so much for sharing, Elyse and Megan. One of the things I did want to mention, so I see we have one question in the Q&A. Feel free to add some more questions to the Q&A box. We will get to them hopefully by the end of the webinar. We'll have a chance to kind of go through those. So if you hear anything that makes you wonder, or you want some tools to share, please let us know, and we'll try to provide those. So I did want to at least pose a question today about equity. In the world that we're in, how are we going to provide equitable learning experiences for all students? And how does engaging in the teacher design process facilitate that for you? So Rola, I'm going to throw that to you first. So how has engaging in some of these teacher designer processes like empathy or emergent experiences or iteration, how has it really allowed you to address equity in your classroom?
Well, first of all, when you're doing designing and you're becoming a community, is giving a voice to every student. And I think that's the first part of the equity piece, is that communication piece, expressing themselves, valuing all thinking. And I think that communication piece, collaborative piece, plays a huge part in equity, having students to really feel, I don't like the word safe, but feel really able to express themselves freely and without having to be judged. And that is the base of the relationship of the classroom equity, and being able to really take those risks and be able to consult with each other and take that leadership together. And I think that is the most valuable part of the confidence, the personalization of learning, of knowing what is accessible to them, what they are able of doing, and how they could do it as well. And I think that's the biggest piece to that equity. First of all, is having them as a community have that space to really express themselves and inquire and pursue any of their questioning that they would like to pursue, and knowing that learning doesn't stop, that is a connected learning. And I think having that piece in place, that relationship piece and that empathy piece, that is the key really to that equity to start with, and that respect of not only thinking but also a way of expressing their thinking, and having tools to really explain their learning. It's not just limited to just the one way of sharing the learning as well. So that equitable piece was the key, is that relationship, that valuing of thinking, that everyone has a voice, that every voice is respected, and it's all connected together, and we know we build knowledge together and we take risks together. And I think that really is the essence to having that community, and this is where the basis of the equity starts.
Yeah, and I'd love to build on that just quickly. So again, in the Challenge-Based Science Learning project, I think one of the things that we saw, which was really interesting, was that in our participating teachers, it was about the structure of the way that Challenge-Based Science Learning works, which is a lot about having students drive their own learning and ask their own questions, right? So what we saw, I think, in the teachers was a real surprise in that students that they weren't sure could do these things and be self-directed and ask their own questions, when they were given that opportunity to do so, they really excelled. So students that teachers didn't think, could work independently or ask questions, when we gave them that freedom to do so, they blossomed, right? So when I think about trying to be equitable and reaching all learners, it is part of that process, like designing learning experiences that allow them the freedom to, like you said, Rola, be sense makers in their own way.
Can I just add to one thing when you said questioning and stuff? So when we were cohort as well, so we were also interested in how best can we bring that equity piece to the classroom. So as educators, we each had our own questions themselves. And so questioning was one of them that I worked with the team, is how best could we, what is the process for questioning, and how do we get students to really be an inquirer? What does that look like? And also reflection is a big piece. And I was part of the team that we did that reflective piece. What does reflection, what is feedback? What does that look like? And how is that you can construct that knowledge and criteria together and have everybody's perspective present in the classroom and valuing each other's thinking. So through the micro-credential as well on social emotional learning, design thinking, and having that ability to really work together as a team, because again, learning, it's not just me, myself, it's having to have a cohort of colleagues who you can work with and talk to, not only just to solve technology, how to use technology, but also to really build that thinking process and the design process of learning.
And Anthony, I love teaching middle school. Middle school is that perfect grade level where they're not yet so rigid that they think they know exactly the way they learn, but yet they're still learning their own kind of thinking process. And so just thinking through this equity, kind of what it looks like for me is not all students enjoy the sit and lecture, not all students actually enjoy group projects. And so it's trying to figure out, I guess, the way the student learns and giving them those tools that really make learning meaningful to them. And I try to differentiate that, giving them choice, giving them option, that not all students have to color the page this way. We can think outside the box. If you're more comfortable staying in this mode, you can stay there. But it's just being open as a teacher to different interpretations of ways to demonstrate their knowledge and different ways to, I guess, instruct the students so that everybody's getting the same end content. It's just providing equal resources and equal opportunities to every learner, despite their learning style.
Great, thanks for sharing. So we've talked a lot about what these projects and engaging as a teacher designer has done for you two as teachers. I'm really kind of interested in how this work has prepared you to take on leadership roles in your schools and districts. So Chad, I know you've done a lot of kind of new leadership work, and Rola, I'd love to hear from both of you. How has going through this process, learning some of these design skills, how has it allowed you to take a leadership role in your buildings?
I think for me, and you're right, I've taken a lot of leadership roles, and even now in the face of the COVID and kind of with remote learning, I've kind of taken over the remote learning coordinator kind of at my school. But the main thing it's given me are the tools and the components to be able to really discuss with the other teachers, my, kind of fellow collaborators, I guess, things that are important when designing these lessons and trying to help, I guess, spread those components of a powerful lesson. How can we enable all our students to have that experience in every classroom? Because that's the ultimate goal. It's great that they get it in my one classroom, but the goal is that we take that and move it to more classrooms. And so within every leadership opportunity I have, whether it be in the remote learning, talking to teachers who are teaching in remote classes, or just talking to even my PLC members, it's always sharing what's best for students and trying to implement reflection or trying to implement the meaningful learning into what we do in the classroom.
Leadership for me was also collaborative leadership, which means really having the opportunity to learn alongside not only my students, but also to invite colleagues and work together. And what does that look like? If this is what it looks like in my classroom, what it might look like in their classroom as well. So having to really accept that that learning together from designing that learning is hard. It's not easy, and there's a lot of failures along the way. And having to, as leaders, that it doesn't have to be perfect, and you just reflect together and move on. So being able to problem solve together, opening up that transition from also having to be just oriented into that specific of having to be perfect learning all the time is how messy, embracing the messiness of it, and having to really learn alongside each other and connect together to really problem solve and look at the learning as a competency base, and how do these students really problem solving in a sense. So what do we need for these students in order to communicate, collaborate, to express themselves? And so that is that leadership, that confidence of really tackling that messiness and learning alongside, not only with the students, but having a team to sit down together, and we all became mentors and learners together. And I think that's the biggest part of the leadership.
Great. So you're walking right into my my follow-up question to that, which is what suggestions do you have now that we need more teacher leaders? What suggestions do you have to get them ready? Like, how do we get more teacher leaders in our buildings and our districts across the country?
And I think it's the trust. It's the trust that you are able to continue exploring and learning. And it is that trust, it builds not only that you have the confidence yourself, but also it wears off on the students as well. And having that confidence and the trust that you are a risk taker, that learning, this is what we know it's going to happen, but it may not turn out that way. And having to build the trust basically, and be able to really take risks and accept those risk-taking purposes for learning.
You know, in my view, a lot of it's giving of a voice, giving teachers a voice, saying, hey, you're really good at this component. Can you share this with the faculty, and letting them honestly have that platform to share out. And really it's creating kind of a mastery within each teacher so that they're kind of owning an area and then sharing that with their fellow teachers. And I think that's huge in developing that leadership within other teachers, is giving them that platform and giving them the, I guess, the permission to say, hey, you know, I am great at this, and let me share with you what I'm doing. And then that sharing will create this kind of collaborative environment, I think, that the teacher leader kind of creates.
So Elyse or Megan, I'd love for you to chime in your other work with the teaching fellows and the learning studios. How do you think we can leverage some of what you've done there to create more teacher leaders?
Yeah, I think Chad and Rola both hit on the collaborative piece, and that to really, teachers feel a lot of that they may have a lot of control over their own classroom, but not be able to extend their reach beyond that. And I think one way to break down those barriers is to help find ways for teachers to collaborate and figure out what shared problems of practice they have and what shared strengths they might have. And I've really seen that be a huge catalyst in building people's confidence of like, oh, I shared this thing that I always do and never really thought about it, but someone else found that really helpful and really powerful. So maybe I have more that I could share that could help people. So I think that really creating those opportunities for connection and collaboration for teachers, whether that's in the school building or like with the fellows across state and international borders, really helps teachers to find those points of connection and help figure out what those areas they're really good at are from folks who maybe aren't in their school building, seeing them do that every day. So I think it helps them kind of get that feedback as to what things they're doing really well, and also get opportunities for thought partnership into how to improve and build some of those skills.
Yeah, I think very, very similarly, what we see in learning studios is teachers really working together in their building with other teachers who might not teach the same subject or even grade, but finding opportunities to collaborate where they may not have had those connections prior. And then in addition to that, fostering this community of learning where teachers are able to share their experiences that they're having in the classroom with other teachers. In this case, learning studios connected teachers from as far as Australia to Western Europe to North America, and for them to be able to learn from each other and hear what's happening in a totally different educational context was super valuable, and increased their creativity and imagination for what they could do in their own school building.
Thanks so much. So I think our next couple of questions are going to look forward into the future. Before we do that, I at least want to address one question we have in the Q&A, and I would encourage anyone else who's heard something that makes them wonder or think to add some more questions to the Q&A. This question comes in from James, and it says, do you have any examples of educators using third-party platforms and content to design, even if it means they design less of the curriculum/lesson and more of a curated pathway? So I would throw that out to anybody who's interested in sharing some resources there.
I think that's something that our HP teaching fellows do really well, is creating pathways for students within their given curriculum. I think with the COVID pandemic, we saw that even more, of providing options and choice for ways that students either engage with the content or express or demonstrate their learning. And I think there are definitely lots of options that you can provide, even if you have a more structured curriculum, to find ways to be creative in the ways that you're helping students to explore that content or demonstrate their learning. And Chad and Rola, you might have some specific examples of what that looks like.
Yeah, James, thinking about, I teach math personally, and so there's a lot of different third parties I use. I mean, from, iExcel, or even kind of a Khan Academy, or even videos that I've created on my own. But whatever it is, I'm still designing a kind of packaged lesson that gives students choices in my classroom. So they may have a choice of going and trying this diagnostic or watching this video or making their own flip grid. And so really it's just giving them the opportunity to experience all of these different elements that create a good lesson in whichever method that their instructional setting prefer.
The same thing for me, really. It's students also bring a lot of their own technologies in a way that they have their own comfort of sharing, and of course we build that as a community. So we there's no limit basically to what the students are using in order to really express their learning. So it's an array of tools that we do use in the classroom, so there's no limitation. And so whatever is accessible and from the board or from Digital Promise as well, and Microsoft or Google, so the students have that accessibility and capability of using in order to design and problem solve.
I can also drop the link in for our Learning Studios project library, because it's really all about pathways that scaffold student skills and just like the knowledge that they're gaining toward a greater design goal. So I can put the link in there now, but the content's already ready. It's really up to the teachers to decide like how they want to implement it, and if they want to add things or remix or take away things. But I'll put the link in there now so you can see it.
Yeah, and I would add a couple more things just to touch on. Another good place to go, kind of to your point, which is like, even if they're not necessarily designing from the ground up, OER Commons, right? So it's all open, and they actually have a way to curate resources. So you might pull a lesson from over here, a lesson from over here, and you'll be able to kind of create a playlist almost of things you want to create, and that's really well scaffolded. Another thing to look at would be our Learner Variability Navigator at Digital Promise, which is really a way to think about the different needs of all of your learners, right? And what strategies you might be able to group together for students who need assistance with learning, or students who are working through a particular kind of math problem, right? So, and to your question in the chat, yes, we'll provide resources for those as well. Great. So let's move forward. Let's look forward. How about that? So next question I just want to throw out to everybody, and it's how can we leverage kind of the teacher designer framework going forward as we kind of work through COVID-19? So how can we use engaging teachers in the design process to really think about how to be innovative in our approach to addressing the gaps that we're seeing because of the pandemic?
So I want to jump in on this one, Anthony, because I'm currently in this process. We start school in 2 days. And so we're trying to really put all this together and see what it looks like. And one thing I am seeing is that a lot of districts are trying to put together this cookie cutter model of what they want instruction to look like, and using a specific path. And to me, that limits or stifles the creativity of the teacher. And so, talking about leveraging the teacher designer, I think we can provide those tools to the teacher and say, hey, here's some resources you can use. Here's kind of what we want lessons to kind of incorporate. But I don't think we need to go as far as limiting and saying we're only using this model, or we're only using this resource or site. And I am seeing a lot of that, and which is concerning in the face of this COVID-19. And I get that we're trying to make sure that everybody's normed, everybody's doing the exact same thing so that we're all in the same place. But I think it's cutting out the creativity in the design process, where the teachers really have the ability to impact the student and make this learning meaningful, where we can use the real life world that they have at home and bring it into the real classroom setting, versus we're just inside the four walls of the classroom. So that does concern me. And so what I would suggest is giving students that autonomy to kind of say, hey, you can find other resources and bring those in. We encourage you to think about how the students can use things in their own environment to really demonstrate their knowledge of this lesson.
Yes, the home environment plays a big part, and I did quite a bit of emergency remote learning up till June, and I look at that as well as when you change your learning environment, you really have to adapt to the learning environment. So not only that, having to build that relationship and really spend time with that, but also having that trust, that the accessibility for kids in their home or outside, or just going for just in their yard. The accessibility that learning is not just for them and for me, but also to share as a community and to explore from their home. So if you're doing substances, what kind of things can they do to explore from the home? Who can they team up with at home to ask more questions? Or who could they go online to ask more questions? And we're doing history as well, the same thing. They really looking at your heritage, looking at your identity. So the students really learn things that they would have never learned at school, from building, from cooking, from having to really connect to other family members online, and having that time to rebuild that relationship and become learning their skills that they were never developed in the classroom, and having that opportunities to really explore that new environment is a key. And also that trust, and having them that you're trusting their privacy, they're trusting you, and staying together as a community. And it's really easy to connect to experts, because it's funny, when you reach out to the community, anyone is willing to help. And so having to really reach out to some member in the community who is really knowledgeable about, let's say, monuments, that regarding what's going on, how monuments really tell our history, and how it's forming our present. So a lot of things that the kids really, that happening in reality, become teachable moments. And of course, these kids are always reading and writing and expressing themselves, and that in itself, they're building a lot of their academic skills as well, but to real relevant real world learning. And what does that environment look like, and what are they connecting to in the environment on a daily basis, and taking the self-regulation, self-management, and to really be able to find that time and the commitment and responsibility to show the learning and learn alongside everybody.
Thanks, Rola. So Megan, I was going to ask you, what are you seeing with your teaching fellows right now? How are they responding? How are they planning?
This is, I think, the perfect time for teachers as designers, because I think even though we know that folks at district levels and state levels and even national levels are trying to figure out what we should be doing, we just don't have a lot of time to figure it out. And really, I think both Chad and Rola spoke to the fact that really it needs to be individualized to your students, and maybe what was planned at the state level isn't going to work for your students. I think one of the ways that we're seeing this in our current cohort of HP Teaching Fellows is really finding the common problems of practice that people are running into over and over. I think, again, that vulnerability comes into play of just hearing, okay, it's not just me. There are other people who are facing these same challenges, or who feel like they haven't gotten it all figured out. People who I really respect and think the world of are also struggling with this. One of the two topics that we're really focusing on at the moment are really around building relationships. And given that some folks are online, some folks are hybrid, some folks are in person but socially distanced, what are ways that we can build those relationships? I think, Rola, you spoke to how important it was when we had the emergency shutdown to have those strong relationships with students, and that really facilitated a lot of the learning. And so really thinking about what can we ideate and design and prototype in terms of strategies to build those relationships with students, so that we can quickly share what's working and what's not working to try and find good ways to do so. And kind of the other piece that really came out of the fellowship was thinking about engagement and motivation. One of the things we saw in the spring was that a lot of places no longer used grades, or the grading worked very differently than it typically had in the past. And it really opened up a conversation for us around, well, grades shouldn't be what we're using to motivate our students anyway, and what are the other strategies and tools and ways that we are engaging students in being really intrinsically motivated and motivated by the act of learning itself. So I think those are kind of two topics that our educators are really diving into now, that maybe there are not a lot of resources, or that's not a lot of what their professional development that they're being provided through their school district, which understandably they've got places that are learning a new LMS, or a lot of focus on the tools so that teachers are enabled to do these things. But I think that the teachers as designers piece can really come in with thinking about how does the pedagogy specifically apply to my set of students, and how am I really making sure that my students are getting what they need and that I'm designing for their particular needs.
Yeah, and so we had another question come into the Q&A, and it's one that's relevant, I think, to this conversation, which is how can we collaborate with administrators, right? And so, Megan, what you made me think of is how do we take the vision up a level, right? So how do we let teachers really be creative, but how do we take that kind of designers framework up a level so that we can get administrators in on trying things out and iterating and testing? So I'd love to throw that question out to you. Maybe not how do we do it, but what does it look like, maybe, Chad and Rola, for you to collaborate as kind of being innovative with the administrators in your buildings?
I couldn't speak more highly of the administrator, the principal I have in my building and really in my district. They do kind of allow me the opportunity to dream as big as I want to dream and kind of go for it. And then they always wanted that to be shared out, which I think is another big thing. Is instead of keeping it an insulated silo, rather they really want this to kind of spread and show other people. So it's just that permission. And I think one thing for me, as far as how do I share that with them, you know, I set up a meeting with my administrator. I speak with him almost daily. He's very open-minded in allowing me that opportunity to share with him, hey, here's what I found, or here's an idea I'm thinking about. And he's open to allowing me to do that. And I think that is the key point, is an administrator being open to allowing a teacher to try these things out, because not all of them are home runs, but it's the ability to try it out and make sure we're doing what's best for the students, which it comes first and foremost.
Yeah, the same thing. It really is the trust again. I get back to the trust, and really that learning is not just a one way, it's iteration, and having to do through emergency remote learning, we're all trying to figure things out. So having that trust and the relationship and communication piece, and having to also allow that collaborative piece, knowing when we are all going online, if there were other teachers having to join our sessions as well, and working together as a team. And I think that is the success, is that openness and that trust as well, and knowing that teachers are going to meet students' need, and they're going to best discover learning together and make it relevant, and make it accessible, and make it equitable as well, that every student has a voice, everyone is sharing in their way, and having that ability to be team members as well. So it's not just like there's a one way to learn, and having that flexibility is important. And like Megan had mentioned about the assessment, and I think we're forgetting that biggest piece, is that assessment has really changed. And so where students are just getting feedback and giving feedback to each other, I think that's the key to the success. And that gave us really a new look at learning. So learning is no longer just like within testing. Learning is really giving feedback, which we usually do, but it doesn't have to be graded in the sense, but a feedback that is constructive, and that students can really build on that and continue their learning and the process of thinking. So it was based on a lot of the thinking process and having to iterate all the time. And so the administration becoming learners with us, and accepting that and giving it that trust.
Yeah, and I think I've seen the same thing in the projects that I've run, and have actually placed these administrators who wanted to participate in the design teams, right? So it's really interesting to see them learning right alongside about new strategies and new approaches to new pedagogies. So that was really instructive, both for the curriculum administrators, but for the teachers to see their administrators in that kind of vulnerable state, and to really work side by side with each other on creating something new, and not just trying to like solve a problem with products you already have available to you. So that's great. So we're coming up close to our time here. I have one question that I want to throw out to all of you, and here we go. So what's your silver lining from the last 6 months? So what can we use? What can we learn? What's the silver lining to everything we've been through?
So I know this has been a hard time, but I do have several silver linings that I think are important. And it's the conversations that are happening now. We're talking about student needs. You know, we're addressing the students' emotional and health needs as they enter our classrooms, which that conversation generally doesn't happen at the beginning of the year. So I think that's important, and that's a silver lining that we're actually addressing those now and thinking about what we can do. Also the tech needs. You know, we've waited until the pandemic started to decide everyone needed access at home. this process has been needing to happen for a while, as far as the technology access and making sure everyone has what they need to learn. And so I'm glad that's happening now. And I think we're still trying to catch up. Another one was parent engagement. Parents are having to be engaged now with their child's learning, instead of just them showing up at home and going, hey, what did you do today? Well, I don't know, nothing much. But now they have to learn there in the home, and the parents are being engaged with it, which is tremendous. I think that's going to benefit our students long term. And then the last one was, it's really given a community of teachers. I know the teachers that I'm around, we created a little text thread, and it started with 4 teachers, and more teachers wanted to add, and more teachers wanted to add. And now I'm up to like 13 teachers, and it's just to connect with each other, as simple as sharing what they're making for dinner to some silly meme they found. But it's created this community because it's given us that hardship that we've had to all work through. And so I think that's been important in us growing together. And I think it's going to benefit us in collaborating and really doing what we need to do in the work.
Yeah, it's the well-being. It really, I always believed in social emotional learning. We always took that as part of our daily practices and expressing our emotions, because if you are valuing each other's thinking, you can express your emotion, and perspectives. And so that even was much more enhanced with distance remote learning. And really that well-being piece is important, and checking in not only with the students, with ourselves as well, and checking in with the parents as well. And it was quite interesting when I made those phone calls to parents, and you think, those phone calls are going to be short and brief, and it ended up being much longer, and having to really listen, and just accept things as they come. And I've always said learning, and I've learned along that learning is a human process, and the humanity which is the emotion, and the emotions of really learning how to not only self-regulate, self-manage, but also learning to express it and learning to be part of the learning process. And I think that's the key that I would take back with me when we go back, and that to really stay calm and be a good listener and just check into the well-being.
Megan or Elyse, care to share a silver lining?
I think it can be both ways, but the disruption of the status quo, I think we have known for a long time that the way that our schools are designed are not always equitable or great for student learning. And so I think that this situation has really laid bare some of those inequities and forced us to address them. I think Rola was talking about some of the SEL pieces that you can no longer ignore, that a student's social emotional well-being is really going to impact the way that they interface with the learning and with the content. So I think that really providing us opportunities to try different things like asynchronous instruction, or allowing students to move at their own pace, and figuring out that different things are going to work for different students can really change our mindset and how we design learning experiences going forward. And then I also think that the opportunity that this has given teachers to really be designers and to really build what's going to work best for their students, in absence of having like a nice, neat and tidy curriculum, or just doing it the way that they always have been. It's a real challenge, but I think that there are really great opportunities for learning in that, that could help inform how we design learning experiences to be more effective and more engaging for students moving forward.
Yeah, I think you all said so much that was going through my mind, but 2 things that stand out. One that I heard from a teacher around seeing her students really take more ownership of their own learning in this environment in a way that maybe they didn't feel like they had to before, and now they recognize that that is something that can be normalized for them. And then the second piece is really seeing these conversations around equity as part of the main conversation and not just a side dish. I think this year has really has made it less avoidable for a lot of folks, and seeing this level of engagement from all different kinds of people around equity has been encouraging.
Great. Thanks so much. And I just want to say thanks again to our panelists today. So thanks to Elyse and Megan from my team at Digital Promise. And thanks to Chad and Rola for giving us some time today. I do want to mention that as we leave, we will have a survey for you to fill out. So as you leave our webinar today, please fill out that survey and help us figure out the direction for our new webinars. Our next webinar in the series is coming up on August 17th. So it is Rethinking Special Education During COVID-19. And during that webinar, you'll have a chance to hear from Lindsay Jones, the CEO of the National Center for Learning Disabilities. That's Monday, August 17th at 2:30 p.m. You can visit Digital Promise /webinars to sign up for that. So thanks and have a great afternoon.